Welcome to the Startup Grind.
Thanks, Adrian. That was really good. Adrian first asked, can I do some PowerPoint, some slides before? And I don't know if anybody was here for the Jordy presentation, which was awesome, but he kind of stole the show, but it turned out great. So I appreciate you doing that and making my job easy. I have a question. So can you talk about being a non-technical founder in a software company? So how do you go through that? Like, a lot of people have ideas, I want to develop software and develop an app, but I don't know how to code. How should I approach that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think we've all heard the story of the non-technical person that talks a coder into building their software. Hey, you can have half the company, just build this whole software for us, right? You've heard this story. It's a myth. That doesn't happen, right? When I started my business, I had money. I had 3 people turn me down where I offered them real money to build the software. But good engineers are really at a premium. So probably the hardest thing for me to do was to get the beta version of my software built. I had to hire consultants they were good, but they were expensive. I had to hire them to build the first version, and once I had traction in a few clients, only then was I able to convince someone to take my money to work for me. So it's hard. It's hard as a non-technical person. And for those of you that are still in school, learn to code. I mean, I swear, everyone should learn to code, because there's no better way to make great money right out of school than learning to code. So I'm not going to learn to code, though, because I'm too busy. But you should all learn to code. I recommend it.
Was there ever a moment when you doubted yourself, or besides the money thing and your wife saying, get a real job, how do you just keep going? Is it just the voice in your head, or what kept you going?
I've been thinking about this, and I think an important point that everyone needs to think about, if you see yourself doing a startup at some point, you've got to run your life like a business right now. You can't get an expensive car payment. You can't get an expensive mortgage, because those things are going to just tie you down. While I was still in law school, Buffalo's a great market to buy a house and fix it up. We bought a foreclosed home, my wife and I, and we worked hard our summers to fix it up. And so we had just a really small mortgage. And so when I lost my job at the law firm, I didn't have a lot saved up, but I also didn't have a ton of money going out the door every month. So it was lean. It was probably 11 months before we were really able to buy anything. I still remember 11 months after starting, we got this big check, and I was like, I want to buy one of those TVs that's not a tube TV. And it was this great moment. But you got to be willing to sacrifice, and if you get yourself in too much debt, you're not going to have that freedom. So does that answer your question?
Yeah. You talk about fundraising. You've raised some money, and you're raising more money. Talk about how you approach that. Did you bootstrap? Did you mention you use your own money? And then how did you successfully raise a seed run?
Yeah, that's a good question. Honestly, the people that I think are heroes that I'm amazed by are people that right out of school create a business plan and raise $1 million. That's amazing to me, because I had to really prove, when I had my first idea for the business, I went and pitched to Jordy and the investment committee, a bunch of, really successful entrepreneurs. And I said to them, here's my idea. And they kind of said to me, we don't think it's going to work. Or if it works, it's not going to make enough money for us to be interested in it, right? Because VCs, they want 100 times return on the investment. And so what I had to do is the first round, I went to friends and family, right? I just basically went to two family members in particular, and I said, I've been successful in the past. Will you just, as an act of good faith, just put some money into my company so I can build this thing? And they put in the money not because they loved the plan. I don't know if my dad even really knew what I was making, but they loved me, and so they did it. And so they put in some money. I put in some of my own money, and then for all of you that have a way to raise a little bit of money, come and talk to the people at 43 North, because they have a grant that they can match those funds. So that's what I did. I raised about $200,000. They were able to match that money, and that was the money I used to build the first version and kind of roll out the software. So that first time, it was hard. It was my money, my family's money. Fortunately, we had this match. But then the second time, it was really about performance, right? It's really hard to get people to give you money for just an idea, but if you do the work and build something and show market acceptance, it makes your job a lot easier to raise money. But the truth is, it's hard. It's hard to raise money.
I think you meant Z80 for the matching funds, right?
Yeah, that's right. Not 43 North, Z80, sorry.
43 North.
It's the, yeah.
You can get $1 million from 43 North.
That's
you don't
right.
get any
But they don't
matching
match,
funds.
right. It's kind of a better deal, right?
ClearView Social is pretty specific in the niche. You're targeting law firms, their marketing, their social media. If you're an entrepreneur, you have an idea, how do you know if the idea is too small to be worthwhile pursuing?
Wow. That's a hard question. I mean, knowing if your market is big enough or knowing if there's a market opportunity is difficult, but it seems like there's also kind of another question you're asking, and that is, I'm targeting lawyers. Almost every day I have someone say to me, why don't you target radiologists, or why don't you target doctors with this? And the truth is, like we will get there, but I think every entrepreneur really has to start with what they know. And I knew law firms. I knew how they made purchasing decisions. I knew how their budgets worked. And so when I had the beta version, I could go to a dozen of my clients and just say, hey, all those problems we've been talking about? I found a solution for it. Here's what it is. Will you guys try it for free? And every one of them said yes, because the problem was one I understood and I could solve. That doesn't really answer your question about how I knew the market's big enough. The truth is, we'll see if the market's big enough. I mean, I'm going to expand other professional services eventually, but we're still gaining a lot of momentum in legal, and so, but yeah, it's a great question. I wish I had a better answer, but it's really hard to know how, if the market's big enough, and if you can get a big enough percentage of that, the market share to be successful.
When you have a successful exit, then we'll know.
Yes. Right, after the fact, it's easy. It's really easy after the fact, right?
So, talk about Buffalo. You were living in Buffalo, you're working in Buffalo. Why did you choose to launch your startup in Buffalo?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think it really goes back to when I was in law school, I went and interviewed at a big city firm, and they literally offered me twice the money as the firm here in Buffalo, but it would have been, twice the work. I remember going and interviewing out there. The lawyers were saying, you know what, you get in at about 8:30, 9 in the morning, and you can get out almost every day. You can get out around 7:30, so you're home by like 8:30. And I just thought, I don't want my entire life to be spent, working. And the firm here that I worked with, I mean, after 5 o'clock, 5:15, it was a ghost town, right? People had a really good lifestyle there. And it's not that they weren't hard workers, it's just they had a different pace. And so I liked the quality of life here, and I also liked the fact that if for some reason my law job didn't work out, I could afford to survive. People who live in Manhattan and are paying $1,500 a month for one room. If they lose their job, they're not starting a startup, right? They're like moving home, And it's very real. And so, I really hedged my bet. I chose Buffalo because I had a sense that I would end up starting a business, and I knew this would be a good place. And then once that happened, and I built my consulting business, I built a software business here because when I was starting out, no one else would give me money, but Z80, because they had this match, and it was a great deal to get me started. And since then, I've tried to fundraise on the West Coast in New York City, and I've had the most success here in Buffalo and Rochester. So, I think there's a real momentum here, and people, the community here wants to invest in great ideas. They want to build businesses here. And so, more than anything, I mean, it's a pretty simple answer. I found money here, and you need money to grow. So that's, I guess it's kind of a long answer to your question.
Oh, that's a good answer. Jordy, he said, whatever famous bank robbers, like, they asked him why he robbed banks, and he said, well, that's where all the money is. That's good. It wasn't the answer I was expecting, but
right.
That's a very good answer.
Yeah, I mean, and I could say other things about, I do love it here. I love the fact that I have a 10-minute commute. I love the fact there's no traffic. I can fly direct almost everywhere I go on the East Coast for work. It's a great location for a business, but yeah, my favorite thing is the money.
Show me money.
Yeah.
Did you have a co-founder, or you know, you mentioned you brought on consultants.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about the team, if there was one, or co-founder, or benefits, disadvantages of.
Yeah, definitely. All right, so this is my first true startup, but I started about 3 businesses before this, before law school and throughout my life. And in my first 2 businesses, I made this mistake of building a business like you throw a party. You know, like when you throw a party, you want to have all your favorite people there, okay? That's completely irrelevant for a startup. And if you have a great idea for a startup and you talk to your best friend about it, they're gonna be like, yeah, let's do that, right? But the thing is, once the rubber hits the road and there's actual work to do, it's not a party, right? You've got to love this, you've got to bleed for your business. And so I made that mistake twice in a row. I can't believe I did that. And I learned my lesson. And so, you know, I don't have a co-founder, you know, it's me. And honestly, I don't know if I could have found a co-founder that was willing to take the risks at the time I did. And nobody's ever going to believe in you as much as you do. And so, you know, sometimes we try to find co-founders to validate our idea, but you know, I think you need to believe in your idea and just go after it.
Can you talk about, say, like necessity or kind of like bad situations and how that motivates entrepreneurs? Like, you know, you started on this journey in the recession when you lost your job. Do you think that sometimes having negative situations or constraints can empower entrepreneurs?
Well, I mean, absolutely. I mean, I've heard so many stories that started with, in the economic downturn of 2009, I lost my job and then did something more amazing than they had ever done before. So, you know, I think generally speaking, it's not a good thing for the economy, but I think for entrepreneurs, you know, there's a book that talks about this concept of an entrepreneur. There's entrepreneurs and they're on one side of the river, okay, this raging river. And on the other side of the river, there's the people that wish they were entrepreneurs. And they're looking across the river and they're like, I want to be like those guys, but they, you know, they don't know how to swim or they're scared of water or whatever. And so I think I was scared to be an entrepreneur, you know? I wasn't going to go and tell my boss I quit, but to tell you the honest truth, when I left my job as a lawyer, I was so relieved because that wasn't the life I wanted. And it gave me permission to go after what I really wanted.
I'm wondering if I should try to get fired from my job now.
I have some tips for you.
Talk about finding a team. You mentioned you started this by yourself, but now you've hired people. How do you find team members that will enable your success?
Yeah, it's a great question. I was talking to a VC and he said to me, the #1 goal of a startup CEO that we look at is their ability to raise money. The #2 thing we look at is their ability to get good talent. And those are 2 things you don't really think about in terms of, you know, having a startup, but, you know, team is just so important. And you know, we were very fortunate. We actually used, I'm sure he'll pay me later for this, but we used Kevin at Select One Search. Raise your hand, Kevin. So anyway, Select One Search did an awesome job helping us find our lead engineer, and it's helped us find a few people since. But the truth is, I didn't know how to find a technical lead. I didn't know how, because I didn't have the knowledge, and so we found people that could help us that had that skill set, you know. And Kevin had just moved back from Boston, where he had run a startup for a few years, and he knew that world. And so anyway, they were very helpful. And I think that's one of the big things about a startup is that you got to understand where you don't know what you're doing and get help, because there's so many people willing to help, but you can't just pretend that you can figure it all out. I mean, you know, I tried on my own. I mean, I wouldn't have asked for help if I could have solved it by myself. But yeah, I mean, I feel like that's made a huge impact because it's a skill set that I don't have, and I was able to find other people to help make that happen.
Did you have customers lined up from the beginning, or were you operating for a while without knowing where that first sale was going to come from?
Oh yeah, I mean, my wife, she makes fun of me for this kind of, because the first conference I went to, she was like, so what are you going to tell people that you do? And I was like, I'm not really sure. And I had this idea of this product, and it was called Associate Terrain Maker, right? So it was all about, the idea was, I'm gonna show associates, the newest attorneys, how to bring in business with Twitter. Okay, so that was my idea. And so I got to this conference, and I was doing this elevator pitch to people. I was saying, wouldn't you love for your associates to bring in $1 million of business? And a couple pitches in, someone was honest with me, which was helpful. He said, I don't want my associates using Twitter. I want them billing, right? And then he said, but do you have anything for partners? And I was like, it's funny you should ask. It's actually, especially for partners, right? So I evolved, and my business evolved based on those conversations. And honestly, I didn't get any business from that first conference I went to, but I learned the things that helped me evolve my consulting business. And my first 8 months, I was doing anything kind of tangential to social media to pay the bills. I built a lawyer a website and a blog, and I did, I was just kind of scrapping to survive until I got my first deal. But the tough thing is, when I started talking to law firms about social media, they didn't know what social media was. So I had to teach them what it was, why they needed it, and then convince them they should have money allocated to pay me. And so, my first client came in pretty quick. The second one took almost 13 months from when I met them until they paid me. But from those 2 first clients, I had one relationship with my second client that led to probably 75% of my business in the next couple of years. So, yeah, it's the first part is tough.
How do you balance the requests from those initial customers for like features or things to add, or I wish you could do this, with your vision and balancing what the customer is telling you versus you can't add every single feature that they want?
Yeah, that's a great question. And there's probably people that are better at figuring that out than I am and my team. But I've got some great people on my team, Nicholas Baroni and Bill Bolden, and they've been through this world a lot longer than I have of software development. And so we look at 2 things if we're going to add a feature, right? If someone recommends a feature and it's the first time we've heard that recommendation, we record it, but we almost never do anything. But once we hear more than one person, or we're able to validate by the data, so that's the second way, is we look at the data. And if people aren't using the software the way we think, then we're going to pivot and make changes to push them in the right direction. So, but it's hard. A great book, all of you should read, The Lean Startup. It talks about building companies, building your minimally viable product, your MVP, and making it simple enough so that it doesn't cost you too much money and you can learn. Every iteration you gotta learn from. And I feel like that's one thing we've been very good at. We've made a lot of mistakes, but we've been learning and improving the product. And I think it's way, way better now than it was 11 months ago.
If you could have any superhero or fictional character on your team, who would it be and why?
Yes, you sent me this question in advance, and I was like, I should think about that, but I didn't really think about it. But what actually came to mind, I don't know, do any of you guys watch the TV show Sherlock, like the modern day British version of Sherlock? Yeah, it's a great show, right? So, I was thinking, Benedict Cumberbatch's character, Sherlock, he's so brilliant. I know it's not really a superpower, but I'd love to have people on my team that are smarter than me and that can help solve the really hard problems that I can't wrap my head around. So.
You travel a fair amount for ClearView Social and when you were a consultant. What are some things that you might have seen in other cities, in the startup community, or just the city itself that you think Buffalo could maybe learn from?
That's a good question. I guess the honest answer is that I'm not really exposed to startup communities very much in other places, but I think it really is kind of an attitude, just an attitude that finishing college, it's a completely acceptable route to roll the dice and build your own company, and I think having that, making sure that all of us are positive and supportive of other people that have those dreams. I remember when I first was starting my consulting business, I was telling people, I'm starting my own company. They're like, your own company? Like, it was just this really foreign thing. So we got to get over that. This is a great pathway to success. And so I think just having having that mindset and that supportive attitude of those around us. So I know I'm preaching to the choir. Everyone here gets that, but I think that would be helpful.
One thing that's come up a couple times, you kind of hinted at it, was like the attitude towards failure. If an entrepreneur fails, how they're judged in the community. Do you think that Buffalo is still kind of judges failure negatively, or think that how could we improve upon that if you think so?
Well, I mean, it's a good question, but it really goes back to how do you respond to critics, And I mean, my journey started out with me failing, and then over the next 11 months, I failed many times. And now my software, right? Everything we learn is from a failure. And so a very smart person once taught me, the only way critics have power is if you give it to them. And so there'll always be people that want to criticize you, or they're going to say you're not succeeding, or it's not good enough. But you've just got to really be able to separate that and not listen to that, to that voice.
Going back to the river analogy, with entrepreneurs on one side, the entrepreneurs on the other. Like how do you make that jump? Like, maybe do you do it part-time, or do you think you should just say screw it, I'm going full-time, I believe in this? How did you approach it? Did you went all in, or?
Yeah, I mean, I was kind of pushed all in, No, but I'll tell you, when I lost my job, I interviewed for another job the next week and was given a job offer the next week. And it had benefits, and it was a good salary, comparable to what I was already making, and there was good upside. It was kind of a sales job, but I just knew I would be very good at it. And I had just been reading the book by Seth Godin, Tribes. If you haven't read that book, it's an awesome book. And it's a book really not about social media, but about leadership, and how the social media world creates groups of people, but doesn't create leaders. So it's kind of a call to action for leaders. And anyway, so I was driving with my wife, and I was saying, this job's great, honey. We get benefits. They're going to give me a laptop and a projector. And yeah, you guys laugh, right? And my wife, she gets a lot of credit for this. She said to me, are you trying to talk yourself into taking this job? And I was like, yeah, I think I kind of am. And she's like, you don't need to take this job from me. You can go for this other thing. And I just had finished this book, and I was like, I saw that I had the opportunity to lead a tribe, and I had the opportunity to stand up and do this. And so, I sent an email to the other people. I had verbally accepted the job, but I hadn't signed the contract yet. And I said, I'm not coming to the training next week. I'm doing something else. And I wasn't even sure what it was, but it was going to be big, right? So I don't know. I mean, I don't know the level of focus that's required. I don't know that it can be done part-time, And I know some people, their reality is they can't quit, right? You've got family, you've got obligations, but it's such a competitive world out there. If you're not putting everything into it, and you guys watch the TV show, The Shark Tank, you guys notice the trend when everyone says, well, I'm a practicing doctor, or I'm an accountant, and I'm gonna keep doing that while I'm building it. They're just like, next. They have no interest in funding anybody that's not all in. And if you want someone to put their hard-earned money, right, that they've bled for into your company, you've got to be just as committed. So, there may be some research and things you can do part-time before you're ready, but, eventually you've got to take that leap of faith into the raging current. Returning to the river analogy once again.
What are some leaders, you mentioned Seth Godin, who do you look up to, or who do you get advice from that you find is valuable?
Well, two things. I mean, I love reading. I think successful entrepreneurs are always learning and have that philosophy. I love the Steve Jobs book. I don't know if any of you read the Steve Jobs book. He finished this book, and he was this amazing leader, but on the other hand, kind of a terrible person. It didn't make me want to be like Steve Jobs, but it made me want to see if I could figure out the way to inspire people the way he did. So I mean, obviously books are a place. I also highly recommend you finding somebody to coach you. And it's best to have a coach that you actually pay to help you, because when you pay them, they're committed, right? You'll have a lot of people say I'm glad to give you advice anytime you want. Well, how's next week? Oh, I'm busy, right? It's worth it to pay someone. And actually, Jason Simone, who's in the audience here, he recommended a coach to me early on in my career. that really changed the course of building my consulting business. And so I highly recommend paying people for advice. That it's worth the investment, because the best investment you can make is that investment in yourself. And going to college is great, but hiring a coach is going to help you develop the things you need to move forward your individual goals.
When you say pay them, you're talking about like bring them on as a director, give them an equity, or you find somebody, I'll pay you $100 to pick up my phone calls, and how do you know that person is actually going to add value and they're not just looking for a paycheck?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I mean, I had worked with a couple of coaches briefly before I met the coach that I've used for maybe the last 5 years. And there's been starts and stops when I've needed a coach more. And when I say coach, we're not talking about like a touchy-feely life coach, that's helping you, know. I mean, this was a practical executive coach that was helping me figure out, how to bill my clients, how to manage my relationships, how to deal with big conflicts that could cost me money. And I would pay him hourly for our sessions. So, we had a monthly arrangement where he was kind of, not really on retainer, but he was being paid a certain amount a month, and we'd have scheduled calls. So that worked for me. Some people don't use coaches, and that's fine, but it was invaluable for me.
I don't know, do you have competitors? I'm not sure if you do, but you kind of were the first one to do what you were doing. So how did you find coaches that could help? Because people hadn't really gone that path before.
Yeah, I mean, I think what a good coach does is they don't teach you what you're great at, right? There's another great book called The E-Myth that's also required reading if you haven't read it. But the E-Myth talks about how entrepreneurs, it's like they're great at baking cookies, and they think because they're great at baking cookies, they're going to be good at creating a business about baking cookies, right? Well, keeping this baking cookie knowledge, I already knew how to bake the cookies. I just need to learn how to grow the business. And that's what the coach helped me do, is all of the practical issues of building a business that I didn't know. And I could have learned those mistakes, but it would have cost me a lot more money and taken longer if I hadn't used someone that had more experience there.
So rewinding to the very beginning again, what do you think entrepreneurs should do as the first step? If you were starting your journey over again, the light bulb just went off, I want to do ClearView Social. Looking back, what would you tell yourself should have been the first step? Or first couple of steps?
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard to answer this question because there's so many lessons that I couldn't have learned without learning them. Like, without making those mistakes, it wouldn't have meant as much, I wouldn't have figured it out without that. But I think maybe the biggest piece of advice that I could give people that are non-technical is to find a technical mentor that can help you make better decisions. So, the people that built the first product for me, they were great, they did a great job, but they were very expensive. And if I had had a mentor, I could have been better at picking someone to help me that was technical, But I didn't really have that, so we figured out a way, but that's something I kind of wish I had been able to do.
What are you most excited about for Buffalo moving forward?
I think what gets me most excited about Buffalo is that when I moved to Buffalo almost 10 years ago, there was almost like this cloud over the city, right? It was like this defeatist attitude, like, by the way, did you know we lost 4 Super Bowls in a row? But I love that attitude's changing. People that live in Buffalo are starting to love Buffalo. And it's like, when I first moved here, people that had never been out of Buffalo were like, isn't Buffalo terrible? Like, no, I've traveled all over the world. It's a great place. You have amazing food. Your people are great. But but Buffalonians are starting to believe in themselves, and that, as cheesy as that sounds, it's just really exciting to be part of that.
What do you think Buffalo, let me phrase this a different way. If Buffalo is to succeed, it needs more of blank.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's simply, you need more risk takers, more people that are willing to say, take a chance. And because the cost of living here is so low, it's easier to take that risk here than anywhere else. I know it may seem terrifying, but yeah.
I don't know if Tom Hessler is still in the audience, but Tom just moved from San Francisco. I hope he doesn't mind me sharing this, but he was paying over $2,000 a month for his studio apartment. So he moved to Buffalo and he loves it. He's still working on his startup. So I thought that was a very cool story.
Is there a question?
No, I guess. I guess way to go, Tom. What are some tools or techniques that you use on like a daily basis to keep the momentum of your startup going?
Yeah. So the first tool, the best lesson I think I ever learned was to have a laser focus on your goal of what you want to accomplish. And when I started my business, I was unfocused because I didn't really know what I was doing. But once I figured out what my market segment was, which was large law firms, and I focused, a coach said to me, you gotta have laser focus on exactly what you're going after. Just refocusing every day on what you want, that was a big help to me. But then the second thing is, and I know it seems very basic, but you've got to have daily and weekly planning sessions. I go by this take an hour to plan every week, and take 5 minutes to 15 minutes every day to plan. And it's not complicated, but one of the quotes that my coach taught me is, in the absence of clearly defined goals, we remain focused on activity. So are you just spinning your wheels, or are you laser focused on what you want to accomplish? And I used to have that one up on my wall, but I've memorized it, so.
What does the future look like for ClearView Social and for yourself?
Yeah, this is the most exciting thing about a startup is there's just so many unknowns. And I tell people, I've never had so much fun in my life, and 6 months from now we might be broke, or 6 months from now, we could be twice as big as we are. And so I don't know where this journey ends. And I'm a huge traveler. My wife and I love traveling internationally. And it's all about the surprises that are going to come. And I think I'm very confident that those are going to be good surprises. And we would like to double and triple in size. We would like to build a very successful software product that's used by tens of thousands of people. And the fact that I might, I used to be, leading a tribe, teaching people about social media, but the idea that we could build something that could change the behavior of thousands of people in a positive way and help them bring more business in, that's what's really exciting for me. I hope that's what the future holds.
Awesome. That was the last question I had for you. We're going to open it up to the audience. Peter, can you run the mic again?
We got a question? Tell us about the software. I don't know anything about your software. You keep alluding to it, but I don't know anything about it.
Yeah, so the simplest way to describe the software is these law firms, they create a lot of content, okay? So one example is, there may be a change. Well, one simple change. A few years ago, the law about divorce in New York State changed, right? There used to not be such thing as no-fault divorce in New York. So when that change happened, some lawyers wrote articles about, look, here's how you easily get a divorce now, right? Isn't this great news for everybody? Anyway, but by writing the content, that lawyer could position himself as a thought leader. And if he's in a big firm, hopefully when he writes that article, he can share it out to LinkedIn or Twitter. And in the past, the firm would send an email to everyone and said, hey, John Smith just wrote this great article about how easy it is to get a divorce now. Share it to all your friends, right? Or your enemies, right, whatever. But the problem is that they weren't doing it. They weren't passing it on because they're just too busy. So what the software does is it lets the central marketing director, CMO, it lets them plug in basically the headline, not the headline, the link to the article, and then just with pushing a button, pass it on to everybody. And then they get an email right in their inbox. So even if they're busy, all they have to do is open it, click share, and they're back to work. So it's really about engaging your whole team's networks. And so one way I like to describe this is if you think about a Venn diagram, the one circle is all the contacts the law firm has, okay? So the law firm can send emails all they want to that group, but the only way for them to access the lawyer's contacts is if the lawyer pushes the button, if they send stuff out. And so, they can get 20 or 30 times the network if they could just engage the members of their team. So this works for other industries. This is not just for law firms. It's about turning everybody in your organization into a salesperson for your organization. And not by pitching, but by sharing valuable content that helps people do their work better. And so that's a basic explanation. Glad to do a demo for anyone who'd like to see it after. So yeah, thanks for that.
I got it.
Sure.
First of all, thank you so much for your energy. It makes me want to be an entrepreneur for the rest of my life.
Awesome.
Give them a hand clap. Thank you. Because a lot of people are it's like it becomes their job. But anyway, I network a lot, and I want to leverage networking for my business. And it's a word that's thrown around a lot, and obviously a lot of us are here networking. But what would you say are some key tips that on how you've used networking and brought profits as a result of that?
Okay, great. So along the same lines of focus, there's this term they use in law firms, which is it's called random acts of lunch. You've ever heard that term before, right? That's a very unfocused way to network. Okay, so to go to all the networking events in Buffalo, it may be fun, you get some cheap beer, whatever, but that's not going to get you where you want to go. So, and I tell this to lawyers in almost every group I talk to, create a list of your top 20 contacts, right? Create a list, and I use a Google Doc so I can manage it online, and it just has 4 columns, name, email, phone number, and the date last contacted. And those really valuable contacts, I make sure that I'm having a quality contact with them every month or so. It's not that I don't have to go to lunch with them every month, but when I find a good article, I'll pass it on. And I may have one day each month where I just go through the list. And so being very focused in your networking is important. And this is one of the things that my coach taught me is that, you got to look for these people that are what I refer to as centers of influence. And you've all seen these people, like at a party, they know everyone, they're connectors, right? We all know at least a dozen of them that are in this room, right? And so those centers of influence, not that we're going to value one person over another, but for networking purposes, those are the people you want to get to know. And so, it's like I was saying, 75% of my business in my first 3 years consulting came from 2 relationships, 2 centers of influence that helped me find the rest of that business. So find those influence, be focused and find those centers of influence. Yeah.
So you were an attorney a couple of years before you started ClearView. Can you talk about how the experience you had working for that several years, how that was critical?
So just to be specific, I practiced law for 9 months. So, it's like I sometimes tell people, like, while I was a lawyer, we closed a deal worth $500 million in my first few months there. And people are like, wow, that must have been great. And it's like, all I did was review the NDAs that had been signed. There was like 200 NDAs, and I had to make sure they were all signed. Like, that was the legal work I did, right? The best thing I learned from practicing law is that I disliked practicing law. But the funny thing is, though, when I go speak to groups, I don't tell them that. I mean, I'm glad that they asked me. I'm glad to say, I didn't really do any work. Although, I've been to traffic court. I still have my law license in good standing. So for friends, I go to traffic court, and I just kill it at traffic court. So I still have a license, and that's fun. That's fun because I'm helping people out. If I had to do anything where there's like stakes, like someone might get sent to jail or something, oh, no way. Way too stressful, Yeah.
I guess I got a question. I do with the social media marketing.
Yeah.
So how do you get from living away for free, and how do you kind of come back? I can do this myself.
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, that's the hardest thing with social media because the tools are all free to use, and so it really comes down to showing people where the money is, how they're going to make more money by using you, right? And I just had, Coach Me Plus. It's a great company with the exercise software that's used by a lot of NFL teams, hockey team, the Sabres use it anyway. Teo over there, he printed out, he did a little diagram for me. He said, look, here's what you should show the law firms. That if 100 lawyers were at the firm, and they pay $6,000 a year for the software, each one of them only has to get 12 minutes of new business each year for the software to pay for itself, right? So you've got to do that math for people. You've got to show, if you hire me, and you're able to bring in, show them the break even, right? If you give them that break even, then they realize that it would be silly for them not to do it. And if you're going to give it for free, make sure that it leads to the next thing, right? So I think the thing you should give away for free is your ideas through your writing and your content. I mean, I wrote my book, and it's like, how much money have I made on the first book? I don't know, maybe $5,000 total. But one big talk, I'll make more than that sometimes, And so give away all your ideas through your writing. But when people want personalized help, that's where you've got to make sure, you get the credit card first, right? However you want to do it, right? Yeah.
So my name is Rachel Stern. I'm a JD MBA currently at UB, and I don't want to be an attorney either. Aspiring entrepreneur. But I wanted to ask you, so your target market was large law firms, and you think especially when starting out your own business, you kind of want to start small. So what were the challenges that you faced in reaching out to the larger law firms as opposed to smaller, medium-sized firms?
Yeah, I mean the problem with anything. All right, so one of my favorite movies. Have you guys seen the movie Catch Me If You Can? So the Leonardo DiCaprio's character, he goes and practices law and he practices medicine, and it's based on a real person, and the guy is brilliant, right? In real life, he's brilliant. In fact, he could have been a doctor, he could have been a lawyer, but he faked it instead and ended up going to prison, right? But so I learned a valuable lesson from this, right? Don't break the law. No, I learned from this that the reason people believed that he was a doctor or a lawyer is because he said he was. It didn't have to be true, but people always believe you if you present yourself a certain way. And so I thought, you know what? If I'm going to go in with confidence, with guns blazing, I don't want to go to these little firms. Let's go for the big firms. And since no one else was doing what I was doing, it's like sometimes I'd arrive to these just really fancy conference rooms, like on the 60th floor, just amazing view, and I was just like, I can't let them know that I'm Leonardo DiCaprio, right? I can't let them know that I'm faking it, right? But you just absolutely got to fake it, and I don't really like that saying "fake it till you make it," but that's the point, right? That's what I'm saying. So, thank you for the question.
Good evening, Sandra Talley. You talk about having a business coach, but do you also have a board of directors? I hear a lot of people talk about you really need to have a board of directors. I'm just curious if you have that.
Yeah, that's a great question. So in my consulting business, I never had a board of directors because I was kind of a solo consultant, and it would have been weird saying like, hey, do you guys want to give me free advice? But now that I have a software company, I'm actually required to have board members. And one of my board members, he said to me when I started out, he said, you can have board members and just see them once a year or just correspond by email. But he said, but I highly recommend you meet at least once a quarter and you prepare for that meeting. And so I do. So, we usually go to New York City where we all meet for the board meeting, and I'll spend, a day and a half preparing. I'll have members of my team prepare things so that when these really smart people come together, I can get the most out of their advice. So yeah, having board members has been very, very helpful to me, and it gives me accountability, right? Because they serve part of the purpose that a coach used to serve, because I'm accountable to them. But also I celebrate with them the successes, and so having the board is great if you can convince people to get on the board. That's a challenge too. So. Oh.
Hi, my name is Mike Spence. My question, you had mentioned personalized, right? And you were a consultant, and every deal is personalized when you're a consultant. And when you successfully scale a business, you kind of want to build one and sell many, right? You sell the same thing over and over. And I wonder, in your software and your back end, what are the key things you've been able to automate to take a lot of that manual lifting out of, right?
Yeah, that's a great question. And what I didn't really share with you all is there was an alpha version of our software. So the first 6 months, we built, I say alpha because it was the first version. People always say beta for the first version, but it should be alpha, right? All right, so with the alpha version, it was this dashboard that would give them all the analytics and make them much smarter. Put this all together, and the name ClearView Social was in reference to this dashboard that we were building, right? And my two smartest legal marketing friends, they loved it. They're just, this is perfect, we need something like this. But then I asked 5 more legal marketers, and they were like, wait a minute, what do you mean by analytics, right? And so the product was just, it was great, but it was over their heads. And so what I did is I went to the other extreme. I said, what can I do that is very simple that everybody can use? And it was like, you know, let's just put a button in an email. Like, that's simple. And you know, there's a lot of there are other competitors in the marketplace, but they're all more complex because we've made it simple. And there's another good business book, I know I'm talking about a lot of books, but Crossing the Chasm, where Jeffrey Moore talks about how you have the innovators, they're the people that first adopt software and new things. Then at the very other end, you have laggards. And laggards, they hate technology. In fact, they won't use technology until you trick them into using it, right? They'll use a computer if it's embedded in their truck. Like, they turn on the truck, there's a computer, they don't know, but you know, so they use it. So we try to do the same thing with the software is just, you know, get them to use social media without really thinking about using social media. So to answer your question, that's what we've automated. That's that very simple.
And if I can speak to that.
Sure.
So in those early days before you got your funding and you proof of concept, you're probably tracking all those analytics and the click-throughs, and that's what you use in your round of funding to prove that there was buying from the market.
Well, I wish I could have used analytics to prove. The first round, I just went to friends and family and I said, like, trust me, I'm not going to lose your money, you know. And I still hope to keep that promise. You know, but for the second round, yeah, I mean, it was all the analytics. You know, I had to say, you know, here's our close rate on demos and of new customers, the people that start the trial. Here's the percentage that converted to paying customers. So, you know, you have to really be viewing all those key indicators all the time, and so that was a huge help, I think, in bringing in the next round.
Well, actually, feeding on that, Miles Price. Anyway,
Nice.
the question I had was, were you doing testing and tracking to optimize the amount of, well, poses from the demos? So you had all the different sales pages and multivariate testing.
Ooh, that sounds fancy. No, I know exactly what you're talking about,
Yeah.
but all of our selling was not face-to-face, but it was over the phone.
Okay.
So we literally, there's a book called the Law Firm Yellow Book that has all the firms, and so, you know, I've got a great executive assistant in the back. Sarah, raise your hand. So Sarah was able to call these law firms and say, hey, do you know Adrian Dayton? A lot of them have read my book. You know, he would like to talk to you, and you know, she'd sometimes book me 7 demos in a day. And you know, I'd talk to them and sell that way. Eventually, our product will hopefully have an online sales process where people can go from website to, you know, from page to page and be like, this is so perfect. Here's my credit card, right? We'll get there, and maybe I get your help to create that multivariate testing. But yeah, we're not there. We're not there yet. But one thing I've been teaching lawyers for 6 years is that they've got to follow the data trail, because a lot of them blog and they just throw it out in the ether. They never look at their data to see what works and what doesn't. And most of what I've learned, it's been by trial and error, because if you really follow the data, you get better and you learn. So
One last thing.
yeah.
Okay, so the feature request, when you do the feature request, do you do agile software development, where you do each individual iteration, and then that's how you augment?
So as of 2 weeks ago, we had 1 engineer for our team, okay? So we didn't really have the bandwidth to create 2 versions, so we had to get feedback and then make an educated guess, right? Now that our team is growing, we can try doing some of that, try doing 2 versions and see which gets better results, but the truth is we just haven't been able to afford to do it that way, but that is ideally how we should go, so yeah. All right, there's another question back here.
So I'm probably the exact opposite of you. I'm a coder.
Okay.
And,
do you want to jump job?
I currently do, yeah. I'm here because I'm looking to change and pivot to something else, right? And I'm not a sales guy. Like, I feel like you're very polished and you can come up and talk to somebody and you feel confident with it, and I'm not that, right? So you said that you had a hard time reaching out to coders or getting a coder. What can I do to improve to say, hey, I'm a developer. I can help you. And how can I get in front of you so that I can see the opportunity for myself as well?
Well, first off, the fact that you just asked that question in this room, I think is a great start, right? Because I know for a fact, at least a half dozen people in this room, that they need 1 or 2 of you on their team. And if I had met you 2 years ago, you'd have said you were a coder, and I would have said, let's talk, right? And it's not that I just would hire any coder, but there is a dearth of talented coders in this town. And it's like, we talk about all the great things about Buffalo. It was a challenge for us to find, we probably spent maybe 3 months, since December, we've been looking for another coder. And we just had someone accept an offer, but to have 3 months without being able to find someone to offer the job to, yeah, I mean, I think, one thing you can do is talk to my man Kevin. Kevin, raise your hand again over there, all right? So, that's what he does. He's matchmaking people. So, but the other thing you can do is, if you meet someone that seems really charismatic and that seems like they're a good salesperson, join forces with someone like that. And the best thing about that is if you join forces with them and it's somewhat your idea to join forces, then you'll get a lot more equity. I was really surprised, the engineers that I tried to sell, I mean, they could have asked for anything. They could have asked for 25% of the company, and I might have considered it because I needed that skill set. So just appreciate the value you have to offer, and go find that person. I don't think you'll have to look very, very hard if that's really what you want to do.
Yeah, I almost feel like, you can't just put out a shingle, because there's 50 million different shingles.
Yeah.
So it's hard to get into a focus group and say like,
Yeah.
So you were correct in saying it here or something, and that's, part of why I'm coming down is to meet people.
Do you use Twitter or do you use Twitter, LinkedIn, any of those tools?
I do. I use LinkedIn a lot, and
so what I would recommend is that you add a sentence, or even in your headline, not that you want to tip your hat to your employer, like, hey, if I get an opportunity, I'm out of here. But just, you can even just put a hint that, like, you have a passion for building products, or that, so people you can have kind of some code in there saying to people like, hey, I'm the guy that does this, and even if you're working, if you put that messaging out in your bio, you'll get people knocking at your door. It's just a matter of that focus for you too. Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't need to microphone. A coders showcase. Why does the startup grind just have a coders showcase? Invite whatever coders are in Buffalo and get the entrepreneurs.
I'll tell you why, because the big companies here, the last thing they want to do is put their coders on display. I mean, no, but it's true. You've got 3 or 4, great software companies here, and they're doing great things, and they're so valuable because they have awesome coders, and they don't want people stealing them. And that's our thing. There's not a lot. It's definitely a seller's market if you're a coder, right? So there just aren't a lot on the market. But I think, yeah, I would love that showcase. I'll come. If you guys come and do a showcase of all the coders, yeah, that sounds great.
You can auction me off.
Okay.
Startup weekend.
Okay, over here first, and then we'll come back, yeah.
There's been a lot of discussion, especially since the economic downturn, that law firms, particularly large law firms, need to change their business model because lawyers their stock in trade is their time and their billable hour. And I don't know how that business model is going to change in the future, but do you see your product and your software in any way contributing to changing the business models of law firms? Is that even a goal of yours when you go and talk to firms?
Yeah, I mean, I would love to change the way they run their firms, right? But I also am realistic about something. And one of my mentors in the legal technology field, one of his quotes is, "It's tough walking into a room full of millionaires and telling them they're doing it wrong." Right? Even though they very well may be doing it, they may be heading for destruction, but they've been so successful for so long they don't really listen. But you've had some major law firms in the last few years that have just completely crashed and burned. You've heard about some of those. And so I think they're more willing to accept the fact that they could be disrupted, that they could be put out of business if they don't adapt. But the percentage of firms that see that is small, and I love being in this legal industry because I do feel like I can be a force for reason and hopefully affect change. So that is something that drives me. So that's a great question.
The last question.
Stand up. It's just a little.
So for the most part, I would say like we're all employed, right? And I guess when you hit the point where you lost your job and you had another job offer, so you're kind of at a crossroads. Do I take the new job or do I start my own business? My question in a sense is, for me, I'm at a point where I'm probably making a little bit more money than I think I should be doing what I'm doing. So I'm okay, I'm comfortable. but I have these ideas where I want to start a business, I want to do this, that, X, Y, Z. So kind of what made you realize in a sense that, I guess it's kind of cliche, but the juice was worth the squeeze. You know, it was more worth it to start your own business than to go back to work as a lawyer. You know, you had your benefits, property 401k, yada yada yada. And what made you realize that it was worth it in a sense?
It's a great question, and it's a very personal question, right? I can't tell any of you, like, quit your job. Seriously, quit your job. It's going to work out great for you, right? I can't tell you that. You've got to decide. If you're in a good situation where you feel like you're getting paid more than you should, whatever, right? That's great, good for you. But you need to ask the question, am I learning? Am I learning and growing? Because if you're getting better, then that's going to help you when you do your startup, right? I mean, because maybe being a lawyer wasn't the right fit for me, I didn't know that I was really ever going to be a great lawyer. So, you know, when I lost that job, it wasn't like, you know, oh, I want another law job. But yeah, I mean, you've got to know when that is, but if you're thinking about it and you're focused on it, you know, and that's what you want most, you know, you'll do it. You'll know when it's time, you know. So, I think that's it.
Awesome. That's all we have. Real quick, May 10th, Dan? May 1st is the next startup weekend. It's going to be specifically for sports and sport tech startups. So it's the first startup weekend specifically for sports. So it's going to be pretty awesome. I would recommend checking it out. May 1st. Our next startup grind is the last Wednesday of April. I think it's April 29th. Niall Wallace from Toronto. We're partnering with Health 2.0, which is an organization specifically for healthcare startups. So if you're interested in healthcare, Niall also has a very great story, and you know he's bringing his business from Canada to Buffalo. Once again, Adrian, thank you so much for your time. Stick around. Thank you everybody for coming.